He went to an alien wedding, only to end up the husband of the king's daughter. For Commander Ethan Ross, a human diplomat traveling for peaceful exploration and trade talks, the invitation to attend an alien wedding was exciting and confusing all at once. It was not just any alien wedding. It was the union of a princess from the Zyrathian Empire, a species known across several star systems for their grand traditions, glowing cities, and a strict adherence to their age-old customs. And now he, a human from Earth, had been asked to witness it. When his ship touched down on the Zyrathian homeworld, Ethan felt a shiver of awe run down his spine. The planet was alive with vibrant colors he had never seen. Massive crystal towers rose from the ground, reflecting the two suns that lit the sky in shades of orange and violet. Alien trees, with leaves that shimmered like liquid metal, swayed gently despite the lack of wind. The air was crisp, with a faint tang of something sweet and earthy that reminded him faintly of a forest after rain. It was beautiful, but it felt otherworldly in ways he could not yet comprehend. The Zyrathians themselves were remarkable. Standing taller than humans, their skin glimmered faintly under their sun, in colors ranging from soft violet to a rich, metallic gold. Their eyes were large and expressive, and their movements carried a grace that made even simple gestures seem ceremonial. As Ethan stepped onto the palace grounds, he noticed that every Zyrathian he passed bowed slightly, not in submission, but as a mark of respect for an honored guest. It made him feel at once important and out of place. He was guided through the palace halls by a Zyrathian named Leora, a kind-eyed court official who had been assigned to assist him. She explained the customs in careful English, which he appreciated. The wedding ceremony was to be unlike any human wedding he had attended. The Zyrathians did not just exchange vows. They demonstrated their union through intricate dances, symbolic offerings, and rituals that represented the joining of families, tribes, and responsibilities. "Sir Ross, you must remember," Leora said softly as they entered the grand ceremonial hall, "you are here to witness and honor the ceremony. Your presence is meaningful. Humans are rare visitors. The royal family wishes to honor your kind." Ethan nodded, feeling both pride and anxiety. He had been trained for diplomacy and negotiation, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. The hall was magnificent. The floors were polished crystals that reflected the light from the floating orbs above. A soft hum of energy, almost musical in quality, filled the space, adding a layer of calm to the excitement. Guests from many planets had gathered, dressed in their most elaborate attire. Ethan's human suit seemed humble in comparison. The bride, Princess Celara, entered last. She was taller than he expected, her violet skin glowing softly under the light. Her attire was elaborate, with flowing fabrics that shimmered like the night sky, adorned with gemstones that seemed to capture and hold the light. Ethan noticed immediately that her expression was tense. There was a faint crease between her brows, a subtle hesitation in her movements. Unlike the joyful smiles of the other guests, her demeanor was careful, almost wary. The ceremony began with the rhythmic drumming of instruments he had never seen. Creatures of delicate, crystal-like structure played these instruments, creating sounds that were beautiful and strange, resonating in the bones. The couple approached a grand altar, and the priest, a tall Zyrathian with silver markings on his face, began reciting in a language Ethan could not understand. Leora whispered translations in his ear, describing the words as blessings of unity, strength, and prosperity. As the ritual continued, Ethan noticed something unusual. The priest stopped suddenly, raising a hand to silence the musicians. All eyes turned toward him, then toward the human guest. "Sir Ross," Leora whispered urgently, "do not move. Wait." But Ethan could not help noticing the strange expression on the priest's face, a mix of surprise and concern. Then, in careful English, the priest spoke directly to him. "Outsider chosen. Ethan blinked. "Chosen for what?" he asked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "The union cannot be completed without the presence of a chosen outsider," the priest explained, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "It is an ancient law. You are the one." Ethan's heart pounded in disbelief. He had attended weddings, ceremonies, and political gatherings, but never had he been chosen to play a role in one. He looked at Princess Selara, whose eyes widened with surprise and alarm. Leora's hand pressed briefly to his arm, but she said nothing, as if the situation was beyond words. "Wait," Ethan stammered. I'm a human. I'm not part of this tradition." But the priest shook his head. "The law is clear. To deny it is to dishonor the family, the kingdom, and the tradition. You are the chosen." Panic and disbelief warred within him, but the hall seemed to close around him. All eyes, not just the priest's, were on him. The hum of the room grew louder, as if the energy of the building itself was pressing him to comply. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Diplomacy had taught him that the first step in any crisis was to understand the rules, then to act. He glanced at Selara again. Her hands were folded in front of her, her posture stiff, but he could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She had not expected this either. He realized then that he was not alone in his confusion. She was experiencing the shock of the moment just as he was. "Leora," Ethan whispered, "what do I do?" "You must follow the ceremony," she replied softly. "Resist not the choice. It is not your fault, but act with respect. Honor the law and you will honor her." Ethan nodded, though his mind raced. He had trained for many challenges, negotiations on hostile planets, mediating conflicts between alien species, but nothing had prepared him to be thrust into a royal wedding, chosen by law as a husband to a princess he had just met. The priest raised his hands again, signaling the continuation of the ritual. Ethan stepped forward, trying to move with the grace he had observed in the Zyrathians. He was clumsy, but his effort was met with nods of approval from the elders. The ceremony resumed with Ethan at the center beside the princess, as the couple exchanged symbolic gifts. He offered his hand, uncertain, and Selara took it cautiously. The touch was formal, but it was the start of something unexpected. As the ritual reached its peak, Ethan noticed the eyes of the guests on him. Not just curiosity, but something else: respect. He was a human, an outsider, and yet he was participating in a tradition that had been followed for centuries. For a brief moment, he felt the weight of human potential, the idea that even a single person in an unfamiliar world could rise to meet the challenges before them. The priest spoke again, words of blessing and unity, and the energy in the hall seemed to shift. Where there had been tension, there was now anticipation. Ethan realized that he was no longer just a guest. He had become part of a story much larger than himself, one that would test his courage, his intelligence, and his humanity. By the end of the ceremony, the guests applauded, not in the way humans applauded, but with a synchronized gesture of hands and eyes that conveyed admiration and approval. Selara's expression softened slightly, and for the first time, she offered him a faint smile. It was small, but it was genuine. Ethan allowed himself a breath of relief. He had survived the first test, though it had not been a test he had chosen. He had entered this alien world as a visitor, a diplomat, a human in a strange land. But now he was something else, an unexpected participant in an ancient tradition, standing beside a princess whose life was intertwined with his by law and by circumstance. As the evening continued, Ethan followed Selara to the banquet hall, where exotic foods and drinks were served. He watched as the aliens ate with methods he could not immediately comprehend, and he tried, often awkwardly, to mimic their gestures. Leora stayed close, whispering guidance and explanations, and he began to feel a fragile sense of belonging. That night, as he rested in quarters prepared for him, Ethan could not stop thinking about the day's events. He had traveled across the stars, faced unknown dangers, and met beings of incredible beauty and complexity. Yet nothing had prepared him for this. The honor, the responsibility, and the sheer strangeness of being chosen as the husband of a princess in a civilization far beyond Earth's imagination. He lay awake, staring at the glowing ceiling of his room, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. He knew only one thing for certain. His life had changed forever, and the story he was now part of would test every skill he had and reveal qualities he had yet to discover in himself. And somewhere deep inside, a spark of excitement grew. Perhaps this unexpected path, frightening as it was, might also be the adventure of a lifetime. The next morning, Ethan awoke to the soft hum of energy that flowed through the Zyrathian palace. He had slept little, his mind buzzing with the events of the previous day. The wedding had concluded, and yet his role as the chosen husband of Princess Selara had only just begun. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the softly glowing walls, and wondered how he could possibly survive the days ahead. Leora arrived quietly as always with a small tray of food. "Good morning, sir," she said, bowing slightly. "You will need strength today. The princess expects to meet you formally, and there are lessons in our customs you must learn." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Lessons in customs. I can barely remember what happened at the ceremony yesterday. How am I supposed to keep up?" "You will manage," Leora said with a faint smile. "Humans have resilience. That quality will serve you well." Resilience. Ethan reminded himself of that word as he followed her through the palace halls. He noticed the subtle elegance of the architecture, walls carved from crystal, floors that reflected his footsteps like liquid mirrors, and ceilings that seemed to float without support. The palace itself was alive with energy, and he could feel it brushing against him, an invisible current guiding or observing him. When they entered the royal garden, Selara was already there. She stood near a fountain whose waters glowed faintly blue, cascading in intricate patterns that reflected the two suns above. She turned as Ethan approached, and he saw that her expression was carefully neutral, her posture straight and regal. "Sir Ross," she said formally. "It seems you survived the ceremony. That is fortunate." Ethan bowed politely, though awkwardly, and replied, "I had good guidance." He gestured toward Leora, who was watching discreetly. Selara nodded, her gaze shifting slightly to the older woman. "You must understand," Selara began, her voice measured, "being chosen as my husband is not a casual matter. It is binding according to our laws. You are now part of the royal family. There will be expectations." Ethan swallowed hard. "I understand, Princess. I will do my best to honor your customs and your trust." Selara regarded him carefully, as though evaluating his sincerity. After a moment she said, "Good, then let us begin." They started with the basics: etiquette, gestures, forms of address, and the proper way to participate in ceremonies. Ethan struggled, often bowing too deeply or holding his hands incorrectly. Selara would correct him, sometimes with a hint of amusement, sometimes with frustration. He felt foolish at times, but she never humiliated him. Over the next few hours, they walked through the gardens, practiced ceremonial movements, and even learned the art of presenting offerings, a ritual that involved precise gestures and careful alignment with the energy flows of the palace. It was exhausting, and Ethan often had to pause to catch his breath, but he noticed something surprising. Selara was patient. Her corrections were firm but fair, and she seemed genuinely curious about his attempts to understand. By midday, the palace staff brought them to the dining hall for a meal. The food was unfamiliar but enticing. Dishes made from plants that shimmered, fruits that tasted of multiple flavors at once, and beverages that sparkled with tiny currents of energy. Ethan did his best to eat correctly, mimicking the movements of Selara and other Zyrathians, but his hands trembled slightly as he held utensils shaped like elongated crystals. "You are improving," Selara said, noting his clumsy but determined attempts. "Most outsiders fail completely at the first meal." Ethan laughed a little nervously. "I hope I keep improving. I do not want to embarrass either of us." Selara's lips curved into a small smile. "Do not worry, embarrassment is human." The afternoon brought a new challenge: understanding the palace politics. Selara explained that the royal court was divided into factions. Some nobles were suspicious of outsiders, especially humans, while others saw him as a potential bridge between worlds. Ethan listened intently, realizing that diplomacy was not just about negotiation. It was also about observation, patience, and perception. "You must always remember," Selara said, "actions speak louder than words. One mistake can anger a noble faction. One clever solution can win their respect." Ethan nodded, absorbing the lesson. He knew that his every move would be scrutinized, and he resolved to act with care and thought. As the sun began to set, the palace alerted them to a public gathering in the city plaza. Citizens had come to witness the joining of the human and the princess. Ethan felt a surge of anxiety. He had not anticipated this level of attention. Selara led him through the palace gates, where thousands of Zyrathians waited. Their eyes were wide with curiosity, and many whispered among themselves. "Smile," Selara said softly. "It is part of the ritual." Ethan took a deep breath and stepped forward, bowing slightly. He smiled as best he could, feeling his heart race. To his surprise, the crowd responded positively. There were nods, subtle gestures of respect, and even a few children waved. Ethan realized that humans might be rare in this world, but there was a fascination with what they represented: courage, curiosity, and a different perspective. After the ceremony in the plaza, a minor crisis occurred. A group of nobles, skeptical of his presence, attempted to challenge him publicly. They questioned his understanding of Zyrathian customs, his ability to represent the royal family, and even hinted that his presence was an insult to tradition. Ethan felt a surge of fear, but he remembered what Leora and Selara had told him. He listened carefully, nodding to show respect, then responded thoughtfully, using logic and humility rather than aggression. "I am a guest, and I am learning," he said. "But I promise to honor your traditions and your princess to the best of my ability." The crowd fell silent. The nobles murmured among themselves, and then, slowly, nods of approval spread through the plaza. One elder, a tall Zyrathian with silver markings on his face, stepped forward. "The outsider speaks with respect and wisdom. Perhaps there is value in observing the world through different eyes." Ethan realized that this moment, small as it seemed, was significant. He had turned doubt into cautious respect, simply by being himself, thoughtful, honest, and willing to learn. He felt a quiet pride swell within him. When they returned to the palace, Selara led him to a balcony overlooking the city. Lights shimmered like stars below, and the hum of energy was gentle and comforting. "You handled that well," she said, her voice softer than before. "Most humans would have panicked. You did not." Ethan smiled faintly. "I have been trained to face challenges. But I will admit, this is unlike anything I have faced before." Selara looked out over the city, then back at him. "Perhaps that is why it works. You see the world differently, and that difference is valuable." Ethan studied her face, noting the hint of respect, the curiosity, and the subtle warmth. He realized that they were slowly beginning to understand each other, despite the vast differences in their worlds. Over the next few days, he was introduced to more rituals, lessons, and social expectations. Each day brought new challenges: correct posture during meetings, proper offerings, understanding the complex hierarchy of the royal court, and even learning basic phrases in the Zyrathian language. He made mistakes, of course, some humorous, some frustrating, but each one was met with correction and guidance rather than punishment. One evening, while walking through the palace gardens, Selara spoke quietly. "You are changing how people see humans," she said. "They are beginning to understand that strength is not always about power. It is also about courage, intelligence, and integrity." Ethan nodded. "Then perhaps humans have something to teach your world, as you have much to teach mine." She studied him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Perhaps we both have something to learn." Despite the challenges, Ethan felt a growing sense of purpose. He had come to an alien planet as a guest, but now he was part of something larger. His actions, his choices, and his willingness to learn were shaping not only his destiny, but also the perception of humans in this foreign world. That night, as he lay in his quarters, he reflected on the past few days. He had faced confusion, fear, and scrutiny. He had made mistakes and learned from them. And most importantly, he had begun to form a connection with the princess, an alliance built on respect, understanding, and shared experience. Ethan realized that being chosen as the husband of a princess in an alien world was not merely a challenge. It was an opportunity. It was a chance to prove that humans could rise to the occasion, to honor traditions not their own, and to demonstrate qualities that transcended species. And somewhere deep inside, he felt a spark of excitement. The days ahead would bring more tests, more trials, and perhaps dangers he could not yet imagine. But for the first time, he did not dread them. He was ready to face whatever came next, with courage, intelligence, and the human spirit that had brought him this far. As the palace lights dimmed and the energy hum softened to a gentle murmur, Ethan drifted into sleep, knowing that tomorrow would be another step into a world that was beautiful, strange, and full of possibility. And he, a human, was determined to make his mark. The announcement came at dawn, carried through the palace by the soft pulse of crystal tones. Ethan knew something important was happening before anyone even spoke to him. Leora arrived soon after, her expression serious but calm. "The council has decided," she said. "You must face the trials of binding." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. "Trials," he repeated. "That sounds serious." "It is," Leora replied honestly. "The trials are ancient. They are meant to prove that one chosen by tradition is worthy to stand beside royalty. Many Zyrathians fear you were chosen by accident. The trials will decide their doubts." Ethan nodded slowly. He had known this moment would come. Acceptance was never free. It had to be earned. When he was brought to the great arena, he was stunned by its size. It was not a place of violence, but of challenge and judgment. The arena was carved directly into a crystal valley, its walls glowing faintly as if alive. Thousands of Zyrathians filled the terraces, their voices low and expectant. Above them, floating orbs recorded every movement. Princess Selara stood beside her father, King Valorn. The king's presence was powerful, not because of size or threat, but because of certainty. His eyes rested on Ethan with careful interest. "Human Ethan Ross," the king said, his voice carrying across the arena without effort. "By law and tradition, you are bound to my daughter. Today, you will face the trials that test mind, spirit, and resolve. These are not tests of strength alone, they are tests of worth." Ethan stepped forward and bowed. "I will do my best," he said simply. The first trial began without warning. The ground beneath him shifted, forming a wide platform surrounded by shimmering energy. Before him appeared a structure of floating crystal shapes, constantly rearranging themselves. Lines of light moved between them, changing patterns every few seconds. "A puzzle," Ethan murmured. A voice echoed through the arena. "This trial measures understanding. The structure will collapse unless balanced correctly. You have limited time." Many Zyrathians watched with confidence. This was a challenge that often defeated outsiders. The patterns followed Zyrathian logic, not human reasoning. Ethan closed his eyes briefly and breathed. He ignored the pressure of the crowd and focused on observation. He noticed that while the shapes changed, the flow of energy followed repeating rhythms. It reminded him of orbital mechanics, of systems he had studied back on Earth. Instead of chasing the patterns, he looked for the rules beneath them. Slowly, carefully, he moved the crystals, not forcing them but guiding them. He adjusted the balance points, letting the structure settle naturally. The platform trembled once, then stabilized. The arena fell silent. Then the crystal structure locked into place, glowing steadily. A low murmur of surprise spread through the crowd. Celera's eyes widened. She felt something shift inside her, not just pride but awe. He had not tried to overpower the trial. He had understood it. The second trial followed immediately. The platform dissolved, and Ethan found himself standing alone in a chamber of light. The air felt heavier here, pressing against his thoughts. Images formed around him, scenes from his past, memories of Earth, of people he cared about, of moments of failure and doubt. "This trial measures spirit," the voice said. "Face what weighs upon you." The images intensified. Ethan saw the faces of those he had lost, missions that had gone wrong, times he had questioned his worth. The pressure grew stronger, trying to force him to kneel. He clenched his fists, his breath shaky. He did not deny the memories. He did not run from them. Instead, he accepted them. "Yes," he whispered, "I failed, I doubted, I lost people, but I kept going." The pressure weakened. He straightened, standing tall despite the weight. "I am human," he said quietly. "We carry our burdens, and we move forward anyway." The chamber dissolved. When Ethan reappeared in the arena, many Zyrathians were standing without realizing it. Silence hung heavy with respect. The final trial was the most dangerous. A warning ripple passed through the energy field as the arena transformed once more. This time the challenge was real. A containment field flickered at the far end of the arena. Inside it, unstable energy surged wildly, threatening to break free. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Celara took an involuntary step forward. "Father," she said sharply, "this is too dangerous." King Valorn's expression darkened. "The trial has been triggered early," he said. "This should not." The containment field cracked. Alarms rang out as energy spilled into the arena, warping the crystal floor. If the field collapsed completely, the explosion would destroy half the city. Without waiting for orders, Ethan ran. Guards shouted, but he ignored them. He reached the control node, a Zyrathian device designed to regulate energy flow. Its interface was complex, unfamiliar. "Human, step back," an elder cried. "You will be destroyed." Ethan shook his head. "If I don't try, everyone will be." He studied the device rapidly, recognizing familiar principles beneath alien design. Energy input, feedback loops, fail-safes, but something was wrong. The system was designed to shut down if corrupted, but the shutdown command was locked behind Zyrathian neural input. Ethan didn't have that, so he improvised. He rerouted the energy manually, using his suit's power core as a temporary stabilizer. It was risky. The surge could kill him. Pain lanced through his body as energy coursed through the interface. His vision blurred. He gritted his teeth and held on. "Come on," he muttered. "Hold together." Slowly, the energy stabilized. The containment field reformed, stronger than before. Ethan collapsed to one knee, breathing hard. The arena was silent. Then King Valorn descended from the dais and approached him. "You risked your life," the king said. "Not for honor, not for reward, but for others." Ethan looked up, exhausted. "That's what we do." The king turned to the crowd. "Let it be known, the trials are complete." A roar of approval echoed through the arena, not loud but deep and unified. Celara rushed to Ethan's side, ignoring protocol. She knelt beside him, her hands hovering uncertainly before resting on his arm. "You are hurt," she said softly. "I'll live," Ethan replied with a weak smile. Her eyes searched his face, and something changed there. No longer uncertainty, no longer distance, trust. Later, in the quiet of the palace infirmary, Celara sat beside him as healers worked carefully. The room glowed softly, calm and warm. "You could have died," she said. "So could many others," Ethan replied. "That didn't feel like an option." She studied him for a long moment. "When you arrived," she said, "I thought you were a mistake of tradition, a disruption, but today you showed something rare." "What's that?" he asked. "Choice," she said. "You chose to act even when you did not have to." Ethan looked away, embarrassed. "I just did what felt right." "That," Solara said quietly, "is why humans are dangerous and extraordinary." In the days that followed, the palace changed. Guards saluted Ethan not because they were ordered to, but because they wanted to. Scholars requested his perspective. Children whispered stories about the human who stopped the collapse with his bare will. More troubling changes came as well. Reports arrived of a neighboring power watching closely. A rival empire had taken interest in the human's actions. They saw opportunity or threat. King Valorn summoned Ethan and Solara privately. "The galaxy is paying attention," the king said. "Your presence has shifted more than our traditions. You have shifted balance." Ethan met his gaze steadily. "Then we should be ready." Solara stood beside him, not as a princess above him, but as a partner. "Yes," she said, "together." That night Ethan stood on the palace balcony, staring out at the glowing city. Solara joined him, the space between them comfortable now. "You belong here," she said quietly. Ethan smiled. "I'm still figuring that out." She looked at him, her expression calm and certain. "So am I, but I no longer fear it." Above them the stars burned bright, unaware of borders or traditions. And somewhere beyond them forces were already moving. The trials were over. The real test was just beginning. Ethan awoke to the soft golden light of the twin suns rising over the Zyrathian palace. The events of the past weeks had changed him in ways he had never imagined. From being a curious human guest at a wedding, he had become a recognized member of the royal family. The court, once skeptical of his presence, now watched him with cautious respect, and the Princess Solara, had become a trusted companion, not only in ceremonies but in shared understanding and strategy. Yet despite the progress, Ethan knew that his journey was far from over. Being part of the royal family meant more than following rituals and performing duties. There were decisions to make, responsibilities to bear, and inevitably dangers to face. He stepped onto the balcony of his quarters, looking over the city that stretched out like a crystal tapestry. Zyrathians moved through the streets below, their glowing skin reflecting the morning light. Markets buzzed with energy, and the hum of the palace seemed to reach him even here. It was a city alive, thriving, and full of stories he had yet to understand. Leora arrived quietly as always. "Good morning, sir," she said. "The council wishes to speak with you and Princess Solara today. There is an urgent matter regarding the Eastern Territories." Ethan nodded. "Lead the way." Solara joined them, her expression serious. "The Eastern Territories have been reporting unusual disturbances," she said. "Creatures moving beyond their normal boundaries, structures damaged. Some believe it may be more than natural causes." Ethan frowned. "Do you suspect an external threat?" "It is possible," Solara replied, "but we must investigate carefully." The council fears panic among the citizens if rumors spread. As they entered the council chamber, Ethan noticed the mix of skepticism and curiosity among the nobles. Some still doubted him, while others had begun to accept his presence as valuable. Solara presented him formally, emphasizing his role not just as her partner, but as a human with insight and courage that could complement Zyrathian wisdom. The council deliberated for hours, describing the disturbances, debating causes, and weighing responses. Ethan listened, asking questions when appropriate, offering logical assessments based on his human experience with natural phenomena and interstellar logistics. He suggested a careful reconnaissance mission, combining observation with caution, to understand the situation before escalating. One elder, a silver-marked Zyrathian named Veyron, spoke. "The outsider speaks with clarity and reason. Perhaps humans see things differently as we have observed, yet we cannot ignore that this is our world and these matters are dangerous." Ethan bowed slightly. I understand. I am here to assist, not to override. My perspective is only to complement yours if it may help. The council murmured among themselves, then reluctantly agreed to his plan. Ethan felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. For the first time, he realized that his human reasoning, observation, logic, and careful decision-making was respected not just formally but genuinely. The following day, Ethan, Selara, and a small team of Zyrathian guards set out toward the eastern territories. The landscape shifted dramatically from the sparkling city to rugged plains dotted with glowing crystalline outcroppings. As they traveled, Ethan observed the environment carefully, noting patterns and irregularities. After several hours, they reached the first site of disturbance. Buildings were damaged, not by natural causes, but by a force that seemed deliberate. The soil was scorched, but the patterns were precise, almost ritualistic. Ethan knelt to examine the marks, tracing lines and angles with his fingers. These patterns, he said, are not random. Someone or something is directing these actions intentionally. Selara studied him closely. You understand it. I can hypothesize, Ethan replied. It resembles certain human techniques used in controlled demolitions or tactical maneuvers. I need to see more sites to be certain. They traveled further, examining multiple locations, and Ethan began to see a pattern emerging. He mapped the disturbances, identifying possible points of origin. Selara watched him work, impressed not only by his intellect but also by his methodical approach, which contrasted with the Zyrathians' more instinctive methods. That evening, as they camped under the glowing sky, Selara spoke softly. You see what others cannot. You approach problems in ways unfamiliar to us. Ethan smiled faintly. Perhaps it is because humans are adaptable. We learn quickly, and sometimes we question patterns that others accept without thought. Selara nodded thoughtfully. Your presence here has already changed our perspective in many ways. I did not expect that when you first arrived. The next day, they reached the suspected source, a hidden enclave in the crystalline hills. Inside, they found an advanced alien technology, clearly responsible for the disturbances. It appeared to be an automated system, left unattended but still functional. Ethan studied the mechanisms, understanding its operations quickly and suggesting ways to deactivate it without causing harm to the environment or citizens. This is remarkable, Selara said. You neutralized a threat that could have caused widespread panic and destruction. Ethan shrugged modestly. I only followed logic and observation. I could not let anyone be harmed unnecessarily. Their success did not go unnoticed. Word spread through the eastern territories that the human had helped prevent a disaster, and citizens began to speak of him with admiration. Some nobles who had been critical of him approached cautiously, offering nods of respect. Even Veyron acknowledged his skill. As they returned to the palace, Ethan felt a growing bond with Selara. The shared experience of facing danger and solving a complex problem had strengthened their connection. She trusted him more deeply, not just as a partner by law, but as a companion in purpose. Back at the palace, they were greeted with a formal ceremony honoring their efforts. The king himself spoke, praising Ethan for his courage, intelligence, and respect for Zyrathian customs. The audience cheered, and Ethan realized the full significance of his journey. He was no longer merely a guest or an outsider. He had become a symbol of unity, a bridge between humans and Zyrathians. In the following weeks, Ethan continued to integrate into the royal family and society. He participated in ceremonies, advised on diplomatic matters, and shared knowledge from Earth that could benefit the Zyrathians. Each day brought new challenges, but also opportunities to demonstrate human ingenuity, empathy, and courage. Selara and Ethan also spent private moments together, learning each other's thoughts and values. They discussed the differences between their worlds, their hopes for the future, and their responsibilities. Selara admired his willingness to adapt and to see the world differently, while Ethan was fascinated by her wisdom, strength, and commitment to her people. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens illuminated by bioluminescent flora, Selara spoke softly. "I did not expect to find trust and friendship in this situation," she said. "Yet here we are." Ethan looked at her, feeling a quiet warmth. "Perhaps life has a way of surprising us. I never imagined I would be in this world with you working together, but I am grateful." Selara smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "So am I." The story of Ethan the human had begun as an unexpected twist of fate at an alien wedding. But through courage, intelligence, and the human spirit, he had proven his worth, earned respect, and formed a genuine bond with a princess. He had faced cultural challenges, navigated political tensions, and neutralized a potential disaster. As he looked out over the city that night, he reflected on his journey. He had arrived as a guest, bewildered and anxious, yet now he stood as a trusted member of a civilization far beyond his own. He understood that being human was not about strength alone, but about adaptability, empathy, and the courage to step into the unknown. And in that understanding, he found a sense of purpose and belonging. The future was uncertain, as it always was, but he felt ready to face it. Together with Selara, he would navigate the complexities of this alien world, blending human ingenuity with Zyrathian wisdom, and in doing so, he would help shape a new chapter for both their peoples. Ethan smiled, feeling a quiet pride. He had entered an alien wedding as a mere visitor, but he had emerged as a partner, a problem solver, and a symbol of the possibilities that humans could achieve. The story was far from over, but he had learned that the greatest adventures often began in the most unexpected ways. And so, under the twin suns of the Zyrathian world, the human and the princess stood side by side, ready to face whatever challenges the universe might bring, united by trust, respect, and the unbreakable spirit of adventure. He went to an alien wedding, only to end up the husband of the king's daughter.